Hey ladies and gentlemen, gamer boys and gamer girls, welcome back to the Escape Pod. I hope everyone survived April Fools, I hope every one of you are in a good health, so... The new bundle is out and I have to say me and we were a bit disappointed when we saw the 12 games that came with this bundle, but nevertheless we played them for hours and made some reviews about them, so you will be able to make an educated choice. As usual, we put our minimum 3 to 5 hours into each game and finished a few as well. So, without further ado, I let V take over. Hit it, V!
I've never played Rock of Ages 1 or 2, but I had a vague idea of them, being wacky games that have something to do with controlling a boulder, a distinct art style, and even more unique cutscenes. This was more than enough for my pickle to be tickled, and I jumped into testing with curiosity-fueled excitement. On the one hand, turns out I was pretty much spot on. Distinct art style, check. Unique cutscenes, check. Controlling a boulder, check. And on the other, it's also quite a bit more, as there's some variance in the core loop of steering a boulder down a hill, destroying whatever gets in your way. Story is, Odysseus messes with the Cyclops, who in response asks Poseidon to curse them. This results in our lads bouncing through history, visiting certain well-known periods and historical figures, like Caesar in Rome, Genghis Khan in Mongolia, and so on. These hub worlds will offer a handful of levels to beat, including but not limited to a time trial mode where you have to reach the end of the map in a certain time, a race where you have to be the first competing with 2 AI boulders, another type of race where you face off against a single AI, have to collect targets on your way down, and first to reach the end gets to shoot for a score multiplier, and the boss battle, which is part having to maneuver your boulder through a series of obstructions and break into the enemy's castle, part them attempting to do the same, so you have to build up obstacles in a tower defense style. If I had to pick, my favorite type would be the speed challenge, as it avoids the presence of the annoyingly rubbish AI, and least favorite were the boss fights, mostly on the back of the tower defense part not really resonating with me. Based on your performance, you'll earn stars for each level, which you will then need a certain amount of to unlock other hub worlds and additional weaponry or boulder types. Visuals can be hit or miss, there's nothing necessarily bad or off about them, but it's easy to see how not everyone would be open to this presentation style. Sounds are nothing special, they do their job, while music starts out strong but gets repetitive, as you'll only have one theme repeated over and over again per hub. There's also a solid map editor included in the package, which explains pretty well what and how you should be doing to build your own custom maps. These maps can then be uploaded to the community hub online, where you can also have a gander if you're in the market for checking out the creations of other players, which, quality-wise, are varied to say the least. There's really not much more to be said here, unfortunately. Rock of Ages is what you'd expect by looking at the cover. A mostly enjoyable experience, a good chuckle every now and then, but unfortunately, lacking the depth or charm to keep you playing for a long time.
Aven Colony. I love city/colony simulation games. I'm actually in love with them ever since I have played the first SimCity, and I was happy that I could get my hands on this game. So Aven Colony is a colony sim that plays in the far future. We are given the mission to colonize the planet Aven Prime, an alien planet of deserts, tundras and jungles, light years away from Earth. The game has a nice look to it, not flashy, not terrible, it looks alright. I have started the testing with the campaign on a challenging difficulty just to see how deep the simulation part of the game is. First, I was pleasantly surprised by the fact that the game does not have many menus and I can easily navigate in between different structures and overlays. I could say this is the perfect colony sim for the submenu phobic people out there. You build up everything from nanites, and you can make nanites out of different resources, like iron. Buildings need power and water to run on, and the colonists need fresh air. So you basically juggle these resources to make things run smoothly. I had no problem with nor the story or the voice acting. Actually, I have to mention that the voice acting is pretty damn good in this one. During the campaign, the game throws at you different problems to keep you on your toes, and yeah, sometimes it is crisis after crisis, and that can be annoying, and if you're not carefully balancing resources and buildings, you can get voted out of the elections quickly. Oh yes, you can be removed by the power of democracy, as the colonists are voting time to time. And if you don't solve their problems, well, you're out, buddy. So far so good, but I have to mention the bad as well, otherwise it wouldn't be an unbiased review. I have spent overall 10-11 hours with this game. After the initial testing, I came back for another good 7 hours, and I have to say it kinda gets repetitive and boring after around 5-6 hours. I have tried the sandbox mode, but it's dull, so I stuck with the campaign. And it came to my attention that even in the campaign, if you realize the exact pattern how to play the game, no matter what the game throws at you, it won't be a challenge, not even on the highest difficulty. The only problem you will have is the storage capacity will never be enough. My other problem with Aven Colony is that it doesn't really brought anything new to the table, and yes, I realize that this game is from 2017, but even in that year it only brought the basic genre defining things. Just for you to see what I'm talking about, 8 months later after Aven Colony released, Surviving Mars came out, which was an absolute banger, and they basically in the very same league. So if you're into colony/city sim games, you should really pick this one. I had a great time with it, despite the fact that the game has some shortcomings.
Colt Canyon is a roguelike twin-stick shooter set in the Wild Wild West. Our protagonist was having a campfire and chill session with an acquaintance when shit hit the fan and our buddy was kidnapped, thus it is now our duty to set things straight again. Gameplay is mostly straightforward. First, you'll pick one of the available characters and equip them with a preferred starting weapon. As usual, you'll start out with only one option, but you'll unlock many more as you keep playing. You'll then be dropped on the left side of the first level and aim to reach the right end of the randomly generated piece of world through any means necessary. This will usually mean shooting your way through, but it's important to note there's a way more interesting option, stealth. Just like in your average stealth game, enemies have vision cones and sound detection ranges, albeit neither of these are indicated. So by not using guns and carefully timing your maneuvers, you can essentially skip most of the encounters, or rather go with the ideal mix of these approaches, carefully pick off as many stranglers as you can and go all in on the leftovers. There are 2 situations in which you have no choice, however. Firstly, every level contains an additional hostage you can free for an immediate boost in your power level through either receiving a passive stat boost like rate of fire or immunities, or asking the hostage to join you, equipping them with a weapon, and forming an ever-growing band of brothers. Keep in mind, however, even though you can give basic orders to these lads, such as stay or attack, the implemented system leaves plenty of room for wanting, so even though this might seem to be a great choice starting out, as you get into the game more, you'll start to realize this actually might be the worst option of the upgrades. Anywho, these hostages are usually heavily guarded, so there's a low chance for a stealth extraction most of the time. Second, seemingly stealth-proof situation is any boss fight, which you'll come across at the end of every zone, as these dudes come with a massive detection range. On the plus side though, the only boss fight I experienced, as I never reached the second one, seemed pretty fair. There's clear counterplay to what he does, and I've managed to get kills on him via different approaches. As a final note regarding stealth runs, it seems the more enemies you completely ignore on a given map, the higher chance you will be ambushed while transitioning to the next, so there's also that as a reason to deter you from probably the most fun aspect of the game. Sad reality is, I didn't really enjoy my time with Colt. The visuals definitely tickled my fancy, that is until the point where I noticed the ever-present screen tear when moving. And I did have fun experimenting with my first 2 or 3 stealth attempts, but beyond that, I couldn't really shake the feeling of mediocrity when thinking about the game. Shooting isn't bad per se, but it doesn't have any oomph to draw me back into new runs just for that experience. Stealth kills feel nice, but non-stealthed melee combat feels weak, both on the back of the lack of animation and the lack of passives boosting this playstyle. As mentioned earlier, there's a hint of a background story being present, but it's so meaningless it might as well be completely absent. Unfortunately, if you take away gripping gameplay and you also take away interesting story, you're not really leaving much reason for your audience to play your game. Colt isn't a garbage tier game, but with the amount of rogue titles out there and what many of those have to offer, I struggle to find any reason to recommend this one over those.
Main assembly. In main assembly, as the title suggests, you're the designer, the engineer, and the architect. The way I would define this game is frustratingly fun. The game advertises itself as creativity beats everything, and if you can imagine something, you can build it and use it. And, well, this is a completely false statement. I went in with, okay, let's build a car, have some fun in sandbox, and it was fun and dandy until I had to start the tutorial half an hour later. The tutorial, I would say, is fun and educational, although for me it felt a bit sparse. It really shows you the basics, but that's it. After that you're on your own and you can use YouTube as a source of knowledge. And that was the only negative side I could find about the game. Otherwise the game is just fine. A very strong contender in the imagine build genre. If you can gather the knowledge how to build what you want, it is a blast to play. The building part of the game is a bit restricted but intuitive enough. The graphics are okay, well saturated and colorful, so it feels cheerful at the time. There is a challenge mode where you can scavenge for parts to use later and you have to create something new in order to beat the challenges. And even though I was very unsure if this game actually worth my time, I had a very pleasant time with it. It is a great community and there are some great ideas that can be downloaded directly from Steam. And it does feel polished and well thought through. Overall, obviously this game isn't for everyone. If you don't enjoy the process of building something and testing it and fixing the issues and doing this all over again, you probably won't enjoy this one. But for those who are willing to gather the knowledge and learn just to build something awesome, you should pick this one.
I come from a family where for the longest time weekends would be scheduled around whether or not there was an upcoming Formula 1 race, and if so, that would be the center of gravity, requiring the entire family to sit on the sofa and watch the race. Got to admit, it took me longer than reasonable to realize how much this bored the hell out of me, but when the realization hit, it hit hard. 20-something years later, I was almost at the point where I'd completely forget this feeling of ultimate boredom, but thank the Lord, Formula 1 2020 brought it back. Allow me to elaborate though, as this is but the bottom left corner of the artwork. Zooming out actually paints a completely different picture. You see, starting out on your Formula 1 2020 journey, you are presented with what appears to be an intro session to the game. Here, you can choose one of 3 length options for a season of Formula 2, which you can look at essentially as the kindergarten of Formula 1. What you're not taught, however, during this part of the journey, is that every possible training wheel is enabled, meaning you're practically playing the easiest available form of the game. This results in races as interesting as watching trees grow, as you'll start in 4th position every time, you'll take over everyone in the first turn and just keep holding W until you're done with the required number of laps. If this wasn't bad enough, not only is this a terrible experience that I'm sure legitimately shreds player base before they even have a chance to get to the actual game, but neither does it deliver on getting the survivors ready for the real deal. Luckily, this problem partially solves itself as you're presented the option to manually tune the difficulty level once you reach the Formula 1 season, but fact remains, This isn't an arcade racer, where all you need to know is how to hold W and how to overtake. Turns out, Formula 1 is filled to the brim with rules and systems that regulate how you're allowed to or are expected to drive, otherwise you'll be punished, and in this respect, you're taught fuck all. More than 5 hours into the game, I'm still puzzled by what I'm supposed to do when my pit crew informs me DRS is now turned on and I can take advantage in the DRS zone, or when I'm told it's time for a pit stop and I'm on the mediums. What the hell is that? Some kind of priority? Does it mean I'm doing good or bad? Nothing to do with performance at all? Fun fact, I've just noticed while editing that there's an actual pop-up that offers to teach you more about the DRS, which you can bring up mid-race, if you even notice it. I have strong doubts that this is the way it should be approached. You can add on to this that there's an entire panel you can bring up mid-race, where you can fine-tune mechanics, revise strategies and so on, but obviously, based on my complete lack of knowledge, I just straight away ignored it all. So, the game starts off with an extremely boring season, then fails to teach you anything. Does this mean Formula 1 is a hard pass? Absolutely not, and believe me, I was just as surprised as you when I came to this conclusion. Once you join the actual Formula 1 season, this game becomes something completely different. Instead of auto starting from position 4, you'll have the whole race weekend to go through, including practice runs and qualifiers. If you wish, you can skip out on the practice events, but I gotta say, this was the first time I've ever even looked at doing these laps before a race, and I honestly couldn't imagine not doing so. Not only is this due to me not being familiar with official Formula 1 race courses, as let's be honest, in your average racing game you can more or less just wing it on an unknown track, but the extreme difference in difficulty of what was now in front of me compared to what I experienced prior. If you try to compare building a sandcastle to designing and building a proper house, you'll get close to what a scale difference we're talking about here, and oh boy, how fun this level of challenge is. I must admit, I've never really understood the passion a good friend of mine seems to kindle towards racing sims. To me, until this point, it seemed these games just blew the perfectly acceptable arcade racer format with unnecessary annoyances and tweaks. While a part of this thought still holds, as I couldn't be less interested in micromanaging separate parts of the car, I think during my time with Formula 1 I learned, or at least started to learn, to appreciate the beauty of a more realistic racer, where you can't just wing stuff, but instead have to learn to handle your car, handle the various curveballs the track throws at you, and you also have to face the struggle of overtaking without body checks. It doesn't stop here though. If this challenge wasn't enough for you, between races you'll also get to manage your racing team in the form of technical developments presented via a skill tree, and you'll also need to tackle an interview minigame which affects your personal career, and by aiming compliments toward the team behind you, you can even affect their research performance. As for presentation, Formula 1 2020 is mostly beautiful, definitely not looking at you though, creepy journalist woman. Even going beyond my initial expectations every now and then. For example, the track intro sections deliver big time on setting the scene. Minor nuisance, but there's no music in the background while racing. I would assume this is so you can hear the engine to determine the perfect shifting time, but listening to over long periods is nothing but a ball ache. Overall, Formula 1 2020 was definitely my biggest surprise I came across these bundles as of late, and I would strongly recommend you give it a shot, even if you're baseline not interested in the genre or the topic. You might just end up with a revelation similar to mine.
Shenmue 3. I have to be honest with you beautiful people, when it came to Shenmue 3, nor we and nor me wanted to test it, but we made a deal, so we took the horror game and I've got Shenmue 3. When I first took a glimpse on the game, I knew I have to read the story up until this point. Luckily the game went by the same idea and it has a long, good recap in the start menu. So with that and some of the story I read, I was ready to take over. As I saw the game begins exactly where Shenmue 2 left off, by recreating the game's final moments. You, Ryo, and your companion Shenmue are tracking down Shenua's kidnapped father, and the two arrive to Bailu, where they quickly get down to business by asking quite literally every living being if they know anything about the lost father. First of all, we have to talk about how Shenmue is still stuck in the early 2000s. The whole system the game plays out is the one we have met in our youth, or at least in my youth. The map seems open world, but you can only move on a predefined path, like in Fable 1 and 2, and you are very restricted what you can do and when to do it. Also, as most of the Eastern games, Shenmue has a lot, and I mean a lot of cutscenes. Every time you want to do something or talk to someone, there is a cutscene. You're walking somewhere, cutscene. You step into a house, cutscene. You move a table, there is a cutscene. The first hour in, I have played around 10 minutes, and the other 50 were cutscenes. I wouldn't mind these cutscenes if they were interesting, witty, or something would actually happen in them. Instead, the most broken voice acting in English comes to life when watching these. First I was laughing my ass off, and I mean, just look at this.
Hi there.
Aha! Come to apprentice under me, have you?
Oh, nothing.
Fear not, for I am the great Suits.
Oh my god. Jeez. Anyhow. Once you have asked literally everyone, you'll get the first info who to talk to and where to find Senua's dead. After that, sometimes later, you are introduced to the fighting system in the local dojo, which was a welcome part, but I soon realized that the fighting is also tedious, as you have to grind your way through minigames in order to level up your kung fu skills, so you can cheese your way through the fighting. And yeah, we have to mention grinding. The game makes you to pay for everything, and you will have to earn money by doing tedious jobs like earth picking, chicken catching, or gambling, or stone tossing. It is the most infuriating thing about Shenmue. I couldn't give a damn about the broken English and the restrictive gameplay. But in this game you will be grinding non-stop if you want to proceed. So much so I wished I could watch broken cutscenes again. After all this, I could still enjoy the game, and it is because of the scenery and the story. These are the strong sides of Shenmue. And if they can fix everything else in the next one, I will be wholeheartedly recommending that. But only choose this one if you can see past the major issues this game has, and you're in for a great story.
Popup Dungeon is a roguelike dungeon crawler with a unique visual approach, aiming to simulate a low-budget D&D session from your basement. Going along with this theme, core concept here is you'll open up your box of pop-up paper figures, ranging from a stock warrior mage cleric trio to zombies, superheroes, robots, or even cats, form a party of 1 to 5 members, and tackle the evil wizard's ever-increasingly difficult tower. Alternatively, instead of going for the next difficulty level, you can play side quests that serve both as a breeze of fresh air and as a means of strengthening your party to be able to tackle these said difficulties. You see, the form of progression in Popup is via charms that you are rewarded after each run based on your performance and at the same time being bought with the money you earn during said run. These charms will offer passive boosts to stats, and you can equip up to 5 of them. The gameplay loop of each run is pretty straightforward. Once you've sorted your preferred composition and party size, which also auto-scales enemy groups, you'll progress through story snippets on a side-scrolling interface, where you come across points of interest allowing you to pick a course of action. These can be either automatic dice roll scenarios, crafting events where you can use your collected ingredients, or combat scenarios. Latter plays out on a grid in a familiar fashion. You and enemy party both have initiative figures and take turns based on that to spend your movement and action points looking to get rid of the other. You'll need to consider damage type, defenses, positioning, and all other usual suspects, but you generally won't have to bother with hit and miss percentiles, which is a very welcome lack of a feature. My biggest gripe with Popup comes related to combat, and is how it lacks to communicate details and options clearly enough to the player. On one hand, controls feel clunky. For example, it took me quite some time to figure out how to even cancel out of actions or certain menus. And on the other hand, ranged actions aren't visualized intuitively, resulting in occasional annoying guessing games where you'd have to take a chance with moving somewhere in hopes of firing a spell or arrow at the target, but would end up not being able to do so. This, I think, is what will break this game for majority of its potential player base. If you can be bothered to figure out combat yourself or look into guides online, Popup has the potential to deliver on fun gameplay for many hours, as procedurally generated titles usually do. If you can't be arsed though, you'll probably find the game an annoyance and move on quickly. Beyond this, visuals are fun, music is serviceable, and, well, the sounds and character commentary will depend heavily on your taste. Personally, this isn't the humor I'm into, so I pretty much just ignored it for most of the time, but you might just love it. I would definitely recommend, at the very least, giving Popup a shot to see if you gel with it. I genuinely believe it's worthy of your time, despite its shortcomings.
Simulacra 1 and 2. Simulacra 1 and 2 are found fun horror games. The premise of each game is that the protagonist, aka you, gets the phone to his possession that acts strangely, and the victims are either dead or cannot be found. In Simulacra 1, a phone is left on your doorstep. It turns out that it belongs to a very attractive young woman, Anna, who went missing and seemed in distress before he disappeared. In Simulacra 2, you play as a policeman who gets assigned to a case in which the victim, Maya, was found dead in her living room. Although the case was ruled as a heart attack, there were many mysterious circumstances, so the case is reopened by your superior. In both games you will have to investigate the victim's phone in order to find out what has happened. You will have to talk to friends, enemies, relatives, gather information from the victim's social networks and messages. You will have to solve puzzles and quick-time events in order to proceed. When it comes to graphics, the games are okay, it isn't very big on the looks, but the games are role-played and live action, so you won't really care about the graphics anyway. What you will care about is the writing, the acting and the voice acting. I have to say, in both games, the acting was fine. I didn't really have any problems with the actors and the actresses' performances. The voice acting in Simulacra 1 has some problems. Some of the characters were acting so bad, I had trouble to be serious about the situation and found myself laughing. Luckily in Simulacra 2, they made sure that the voice acting was on point as well. In both of the games, the spookiness is there and some of the jump scares can raise the hair. All in all, it was a pleasant surprise, and I enjoyed both of those games, although I have yet to find one or two endings. I have to say I never really enjoyed horror games and I tend to stay away from them as much as I can. But I would recommend this game even for those who are easily spooked, as even I could enjoy them.
Broken Porcelain is the second entry to the Remothered series, following Tormented Fathers, and is apparently the proud owner of the 2020 Game of the Year award from the Rely on Horror community, beating Resident Evil 3, which I find hilarious. In case you missed out on the first part, fret not, the game generously offers a recap of the events of that title. Such a nice gesture from the devs, they grant the consumer the comfort of learning the story without having to buy the previous title. Definitely A+ for being nice guys. Unfortunately, it's much harder to say anything positive of the following intro scene you get put into. You take control of the protagonist in a place you'd never want to visit, get an opportunity to familiarize yourself with both the glorious visuals and the very bad camera angle, and you're told to explore the area. What this comes down to is walking around the room until you stumble across a weird figure who keeps walking at you until it eventually kills you. All this time, you're not taught anything about the controls, the goal, or the lore of the game. It's frankly just a complete waste of everyone's time. You then get to play the actual game, which boils down to the following. Step 1, discover your surroundings. Step 2, avoid bad guy. Step 3, achieve objective. Step 4, defeat bad guy. Sounds straightforward, but sadly just falls dead flat on its face. Discovery is boring, thanks to the lack of variety and the overabundance of drops. It's also clunky due to the point of view you get, but at least carries a hidden minigame of counting how many butter knives you can find in 30 seconds. The objectives/puzzles seem to boil down to grab something in one end of the level and take it to the other end. And as for the bad guys, instead of being scary, they are just plain ridiculous. Should you fail to stealth past them, because I don't know, you fell asleep in boredom, you'll enter a chase sequence which can be resolved by running over to the closest room and popping into one of the available hiding spots. 99% of the time, that's all you need to do, occasionally disrupted by being grabbed out of the hiding spot, even though, in theory, they're not supposed to be able to find you there, and in these cases, you'll just run back to the previous room, hide there, and go on with your life. After achieving a given number of objectives, you'll be tasked with killing the enemy, which is as exciting of an experience as watching food being heated, and you keep repeating these 4 steps again in the next act. I thought the saving grace to Remothered would be its story, which started out in an interesting manner, but was quickly spoiled by the completely unreasonable cuts in dialogue, continued to alienate me with things just happening because plot instead of happening on the back of logic. For example, there's a part where Ugly Worm Lady comes and starts the washing machine. You're expected to interact with said machine, to find the key, and as soon as you do that, Wormy teleports right back down as she, for some reason, notices the machine has stopped. Just a few minutes later, you need to restore power to the building, which can obviously only be done in one very specific location, but as the devs didn't want the chase to start here, she just can't be asked to come over. Finally, the story completely lost my interest when it turned out I have superpowers, so that's a big no from me on that front as well. All in all, if you ask me, this title is a waste of your time, energy and money. If I were you, I would just completely ignore it.
Skully. With so few 3D platformers released, some of the fans of the genre may still be tempted to give Skully a chance. And it's hard to blame them. However, the game is just a frustrating experience from start to finish with very few redeeming qualities. I feel Skully had a huge potential, but due to the overall low quality, I can't really recommend it. Let me break this down for you. The world and the story is quite charming. You are Skully, a skull that was washed ashore on a remote island just to be found by a deity, who is a god of mud and stones. And by his powers, Skully comes alive once again to help to resolve a family feud. The game starts out with this and you start exploring the island as a rolling skull in the mud. Until this point the game feels quite nice, but then you actually start playing it. First thing first, I had problems with the game connecting my Xbox controller, so I had to switch to another one, but you know, that's okay, sometimes things like this happen. But because of this problem I have tried it with mouse and keyboard and... God please, don't do that to yourselves. Skully is unplayable without a controller and is semi-playable with it. The rolling around is quite fun, until you actually have to do platforming on a not completely flat surface. As you can imagine, if it's not flat you can't actually be still, and Skully will roll everywhere. That would be okay if you could actually see sometimes where you would land and could be prepared beforehand. Sadly, the terrible camera makes it sure that you fail every damn time. As the game progresses, Skully will have different forms, so the game can throw puzzles at you to solve. Which would be a nice addition if those puzzles won't ruin the pace of the game and would not cause a lot of backtracking. What I mean is, the original skull-shaped Skully is fast, bouncy, the second form is large, slow as hell, and the third one is medium-sized and can sprint. However, during sprinting, the controls are barely responding, so you will be using it very rarely. The levels are at least a bit different from each other, but they are still feeling the same. Overall, intentions were good and the game has attractive ideas. However, the design of its scenarios, weird and odd puzzles, and terrible camera makes Skully a minor title within its genre. I feel Skully had a huge potential, but due to the overall low quality, like dated visuals, poor voice acting and terrible camera, I can't really recommend it. Only for those who are really into the platforming genre.
In Other Waters is an exploration/adventure game that places you in the role of a diving suit AI, or so it would seem after the first few hours. Our protagonist is a biologist called to an alien planet by her friend and colleague, but instead of the meetup, finds previously unknown flora and fauna and attempts to unravel the mystery of said friend's disappearance. Your role in all of this is guiding her through the landscape and keeping her alive. Although, the introductory first minutes of gameplay are, to put it nicely, clunky at best. I mean, it honestly wouldn't have hurt anyone to highlight what exactly you're expected to interact with on an interface that is objectively hard to read. You got to give credit where credit is due. It pretty much shows you what you can expect from your experience with the game. You'll guide Ellery's movement via nodes, you'll pay attention to her suit's power and oxygen levels, and you'll discover more and more life forms and details about them. Occasionally, you'll also engage in dialogue with her by selecting a yes or no response, but these occasions are few and far in between. She usually just delivers commentary in a poetic manner. The obvious and undeniable strength of Waters is its ambience. The minimalistic but high quality visuals, the ambient background music, and the complete lack of knowledge of your surroundings all work together to push you towards discovery by creating a mysterious and intriguing world. And it doesn't stop there either, but instead rewards you for your efforts. Majority of nodes you come across will be filler nodes, but I'd wager about 1 in every 10 or so will offer something new to explore. To illustrate how this works, imagine going on a hike with a friend. You're walking through dense woods when suddenly they grab your arm and excitedly point you in a direction. Look, over there! You're not quite sure what you saw, but you know it was something that moves fast and is probably brown. You keep walking, and again, you notice something similar, but this time it's closer, so you can start guessing its size. A few more spottings, and you're now certain it's your lucky day. It wasn't a bear, but a deer. However, weirdly enough, it walked on 2 instead of 4 legs and had a trio of antlers, not just the usual 2. Based on this, you decide to name it Tristag, scribble down some notes, and start tracking it to discover more about it. This is In Other Waters at its prime. Finding something new, going out of your way to learn more about it, and doing so again with something else that you found on your way. There's also a main storyline about finding the missing friend, as I mentioned before, but during my playtime, I've pretty much handled that one as a side objective. Not everything is sunshine and apple pies though. Movement feels like it requires more effort than would be reasonable. The gathering activity, through which you can pick up different items to analyze and to interact with your surroundings, is nothing else but a flat-out terrible mechanic. And for some weird reason, the game will hit you with a second or 2 of stuttering for seemingly no reason whatsoever every now and then. This trio of cons is certainly annoying. I'm not even going to try to downplay them, but I strongly feel that if you're intrigued by the visuals, the strong exploration aspect, or are just looking for a relaxing gaming experience in the insanity the world presents nowadays, In Other Waters is definitely something you should check out.
Sniper Ghost Warrior Contracts. Sniper Ghost Warrior Contracts is one of two big names from this bundle, the other being Formula 1. This game was developed by CI Games and was released in 2019. In this game you are putting yourself in the shoes of a sniper who got some nice tech, a bunch of weapons and some contracts to fulfill in Siberia. The game uses the CryEngine, which looks a bit dated nowadays, but still a nice thing to look at. I was running it with max graphics settings, and it ran very smoothly. There were no problems with it. The game itself has a very faint story, which in my opinion serves as an excuse to complete missions. The story and the characterization are so weak that when you finish the game, you don't even remember the name of one of the game's characters. The gameplay on the other hand is solid. Luckily the devs have made some changes that caused the game to be more of a simulation than to be an arcade. You will have your sniper rifle with your high-tech mask on your face as the standard kit, but you will get other playthings like different kind of bullets, like armor piercing, tagging, EMP bullets, etc. You can bring on the mission with you different grenades, traps, auto turrets, gases, so on. The gunplay is very satisfying when it comes to the sniper rifles. The bullet cam is also awesome. It is overall a great feeling to snipe someone from miles away. When it comes to the sidearms, however, well, it has problems. First of all, no sidearm can have a silencer, which basically means you can't use them as it would hurt you being the Ghost as the title suggests. Semi-automatic rifles have a firing delay that makes them as slow as a bolt-action rifle when firing rapidly. When it comes to the enemies, well, they are dumb as a headless chicken. If you want to sneak around and be clever, you only need to watch out for the cameras and nothing else. I was playing the game on the highest difficulty because I have played almost every sniper game in the past, and it just wasn't a challenge at all. Not because I'm a demigod when it comes to those games, it's just the AI that is completely idiotic. This game is solid when it comes to the sniper mechanics and the semi-open world setting. It is fun to snipe people down from afar, but these are the only things that the game will give to you. If you enjoy the genre, pick this one, otherwise grab another one from this bundle.
Let's be honest here. Seeing the bundle on release, no one expected their balls to be blown off by the quality. We had the option to choose from a single-player FPS, a racing game, 2 adventure titles, 2 horror games, a builder, a strategy game, 2 roguelikes, and 2 physics platformers, most of these boasting titles we never even heard before. Digging ourselves through this pile, in our opinion for April, top end of the package was Formula 1 2020, In Other Waters, and Popup Dungeon. Low tier entries were Colt Canyon, Remothered Broken Porcelain and Skully, leaving Rock of Ages, Sniper Ghost Warrior, Aven Colony, Simulacra 1 and 2, Main Assembly and Shenmue 3 in the midfield. This sums up to a total of 24 points out of the maximum 36. I guess, at the very least, we had no disaster level entries this time around. Here's hoping this is only a sign that next month will be a banger. As always, we'd be very grateful if you please the machine gods by liking our video. If you'd like to come along for next month's ride, don't hesitate to subscribe. Any and all recommendations are welcome in the comment section. You're really running out of time if you haven't yet pruned the vegetation in order to maximize crop yield, and we hope to see you again in May.